So my motivation for having a home birth was how my first birth, and how unhappy I was with my first birth. I had taken, the Bradley classes, and I had the plan that, I was going to wait at home and go into the hospital at the last minute so that I wouldn't have all the interventions.
Right.
And I had even seen, the Ricky Lake, The Business of Being Born. I think I was about 7 months along. And I was like, oh, no, none of that will happen to me. No, it'll never happen to me. And at about a week overdue, my OB said, okay, you have to come in, you have to be checked. And when I was being checked, my water broke.
Oh, man. She was doing a vaginal exam?
She was doing a vaginal exam, and I truly think she probably stripped my membranes. That's
to get things going.
That's my guess. I mean, you can't claim someone did it, but as far as she was concerned, I was going in that night anyway to get the Pitocin, to get everything started.
So she was going to induce you at 7 days overdue?
Me at 7 days overdue. And that was her line, 7 days. And I had a doula, and my doula worked with that doctor quite a bit. And she said, go in, talk her, see if you can get, a couple more days. Is Teddy going to wake up?
He's going to fall asleep. Oh,
just me. So she tested, my water had broken. And I said, well, let me go home and see if I can get my labor started. And she's like, oh, you risk all sorts of things. Your baby could have brain damage. He could, have all these problems. And so, with that scare, I went into the hospital. I didn't have my stuff with me. I hadn't intended on staying. And I had no contractions. It's just that my water had broken. And it was a tiny, tiny leak. So my doula told me, go to sleep, wake up, you'll have contractions. I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning. I had nothing. I went into the hospital. I didn't have my stuff or anything.
You had no contractions, you were saying?
No contractions. I called my doula, and she said, go to sleep. Your contractions will start, overnight usually. And nothing happened. And my labor partner, who's a friend of mine, she came, she spent the night. I woke up in the morning, no contractions, no nothing, and they started me on Pitocin. And they start you on Pitocin, and they do little incremental up, raising of it. Went as high as it can go, and according to the machines, I was having back-to-back contractions, but I didn't feel anything.
Wow.
And I wasn't dilating.
Wow.
So they took me off the Pitocin, and my doctor said, let's just give you a C-section. Failure to progress. And I said, no, I don't want a C-section. I do not want a C-section. I'm fine. The baby's fine. I don't want a C-section. And because I'd had this doctor for 10 years, I think she kind of knew I really did not want a C-section. Mm-hmm. And there was a nurse that I had been working with, and she knew I didn't want a C-section. I had a birth plan, it had everything on it. So my doctor took me off the Pitocin. She gave me a 3-hour break, at which point I started feeling really gentle contractions, period kind of contractions. And then after that, the doctor put me back on the Pitocin, and the contractions started to pick up. But they just kept turning it up. Every 30 minutes, they just turned up the Pitocin. And so at this point, I'd been in the hospital for 36 hours with my water broken.
Oh.
And they already had me on the monitors. I had constant monitoring. I wasn't allowed to get up out of the bed because every time I did, they lost the baby's heartbeat.
Oh, right.
And the only reason the doctor had said she would let me keep going was if I had constant fetal monitoring, and both of us were okay. Any sign of any stress, and we were going in for a C-section.
Right.
So at about 4 in the morning, I went ahead and took the epidural because it's like I was lying in the bed and they wouldn't let me do anything other than lie there. And it was like I was just waiting for the truck to come hit me.
Yeah.
I couldn't move. I couldn't get up.
So did you notice that managing your contractions strapped to the bed was much more difficult than when you were able to walk around?
It's so completely different. They let me go to the bathroom at one point before I had the epidural, and I was like, I could just sit on the toilet the whole time and have contractions. It was like a complete different thing. But when you're on your side in the bed, You know, there's just nothing you can do, and you're just waiting for it to hit you. I needed to get up and move, and they wouldn't let me. So what I ended up doing was getting the epidural, and then that made me sick.
Really?
I threw up. It ended up giving me a rash, and I was just out of it. They put me on oxygen, and so I just laid there, and they just kept turning up the Pitocin and turning up the Pitocin. And finally, it was 48 hours after my water had broken.
Wow.
I was finally ready to push.
Okay.
And that was like the one thing that I felt like I really did well with. I'd read the Ina May Gaskin book, and I blew the raspberry lips, and I pushed that baby out in about 40 minutes. But because I'd been on the IVs for so long, I was swollen, and my perineum wouldn't stretch.
Right.
The doctor stretched, and so she ended up having to give me an episiotomy. Because at 49 hours, my fluids were finally pussy, and I was starting to get an infection.
Oh my gosh!
So I couldn't see doing that again, and I knew that with the new doctors group I was with, I could get any one of these doctors, and none of them were going to know me. None of them were going to really care that I wanted this time and this chance to have my baby without having a C-section.
Right.
And I was going to end up with a C-section. Because usually if you have failure to progress in your first pregnancy, you're going to have it again in your second. You're late in your first, you're going to be late in your second.
Right.
And I just knew that I was going to end up with a C-section, like, 50% of my friends who just don't even consider it